Shane, it's lovely to see you here tonight at the Virgin Media Shorts Awards. What are you looking forward to this evening?
I think the thing I'm most looking forward to is actually seeing how people, the guys that have obviously got their film shown tonight, how they take all this in, because I can remember my first short film competition coming to London 20 years ago, and it wasn't quite on this scale. I didn't have photographs of myself up on the wall, but I can remember coming from the tiny place I was living, and so I think the thing I'm most looking forward to is seeing them be celebrated, and almost this is like for them being at Cannes or something. They've made such a big deal of it that I think that's amazing, because short films tend to be seen as like a poor cousin or poor relation to features, and tonight's massive, and they're making a massive deal of it, and that's ace.
Now, how tough is it being a judge for those films?
It is, because when obviously I started out making shorts and I've entered them, and I've lost way more competitions than I've won, and so when you're writing those scores down that the one lovely thing was that I wasn't the only judge, and I don't ultimately know who's won. Obviously, you vote for the ones that speak to you, and so they're not. If it had all come down onto me, and then I'd seen someone who I saw a kid here tonight, and I thought, oh, geez, I wish I'd given him a few more. That would have broke my heart. So I think that's probably the toughest thing, is actually putting a score to people's hard work.
Now, obviously, we've seen you recently, your latest film, The Stone Roses Made in Stone. Brilliant film. I mean, so much fun, I guess, making that, because you're such a fan, aren't you?
Yeah, it was one of those almost death-defying, dare I even take it on, because it was almost too good to be true. There's not many people who, when they were 16 and lost their ticket to go to Spike Island, kind of didn't make it there and all of that end up, roll forward 20 years, and that idol of yours, the band that you thought you were never going to see, one of them rings you up and asks you to make a film. It was almost like, this has to be cursed. There must be I'm going to do it and I'm not going to do a good job, or I'm going to do it and they're going to hate me and think I'm a jerk, and so it was one of them. I kept looking over my shoulder thinking, it's like winning the lottery for me, and I was just about to start another film, and when that call came through, it was like, I spoke to my producer, and we had to keep it secret. We knew they were getting back together until they announced it. But that was one of them where we both said, if all that happens is we get to see one rehearsal and they decide they don't want us to do it, or they decide we're idiots, then it'll be worth it.
How difficult was it keeping it quiet? Because as you say, you had to keep it on the lowdown, didn't you?
Yeah, it wasn't so bad for me, but my producer, he's very energetic, and I think it was much harder for him, to be honest with you, because a lot of his friends he still sees who were into the Roses. So he just disappeared. I think he just went to a Holiday Inn and stayed there for 2 weeks because he knew he'd blab.
It was a very different way you shot that film as well, wasn't it? So many cameras as well, very different for you. How did you find it when you were doing it compared to, say, This Is England?
Yeah, This Is England, I tend to use 2 cameras all the time, and at its peak at Heaton Park on the Made of Stone film, we had 35 cameras, and that would be ranging from some sort of 35mm sensor digital cameras, Red Epics, down to Nikon digital SLRs, Canon digital SLRs, GoPros, time-lapse. It was just, and the mad thing about it was I always thought, I'd never be built to make a big film, and although I'd never want to make a generic action movie, it did teach me that if I ever wanted to make something with a bigger scale, I could probably do it. It's no different in a way, as long as your heart's in it and you believe in the story, it can grow. And but the lovely thing was I now know every single camera that exists, and I've used them all. So.
Now, the film that you said you put aside for the Stone Roses film, that was, I guess, This Is England, going to be working on that.
Yeah, well, there was 2. I was working on a feature film about a cyclist called Tom Simpson, who sadly died on Mount Ventoux in the 60s Tour de France, and ultimately I was about to start writing that, and I also had the co-writer working on This Is England 90, the sort of final hurrah for that, and both of them sort of got put to one side, and we're now getting them back up again. If I write it before I rehearse, then I just change everything that I've written, because the actors have they bring a lot to it, so when you get sent in a room with Stephen Graham, Vicky McClure, Andrew Shim, and Joe Gilgon, they tend to bring stuff into that room that I'd not thought of, and then I end up, everyone at Channel 4 would probably have fallen in love with the original ideas, and then you go, it's changed now, he's a magician, he's caught a rare genetic illness, and then they're kind of not ready for it. So I tend to try and rehearse first, and then write.
Okay, that's interesting tactics there.
Yeah.
And Vicky in particular has done amazing since, you know, you sort of catapulted her in a way, I suppose, into great things.
Well, yeah, it's a mad overnight success that began in 1998 when we did Romeo Brass, and didn't really, I think it was This Is England 86, it appeared to be an overnight success, but for Vicky, she worked for 10 years in an office filling machines. You know, it's like she, like a lot of these, like the Stone Roses, everyone thinks they were an overnight success, but they started in like 83.
Yeah.
You know, and so behind every overnight success is usually a decade of hard work, and Vicky had put her work in there, and the beautiful thing about making the series with This Is England was that I was able to examine some of the other characters and hopefully shrug off that reputation of being a sort of masculine actors-only director, you know.
And obviously 86 and 88 were amazing. Because of that, do you feel any sort of pressure on like the next series to make it as equally as good or better?
Yeah, and I think that's kind of a good pressure, you know, and you know, it's like coming to an event like this tonight, that, you know, you're setting people up for the reality of what's out there. You know, that I've just been in there and seen the screen. You know, you're at the eye. It's massive, yeah. But you know, that's how it should be. You should prepare people for what's coming, because ultimately, when push comes to shove, your work gets watched and it gets viewed, and people are hot. And with the internet now, people are more than harsh. And so it's kind of like it's best to prepare people. And obviously, I'm prepared for it, and I love pressure, to be honest with you. And it drives you on. You know, when you're in one of them shoots where you think, have we got it? Have we not? You'd normally, a lot of crews and TV would just get in the cars and go home. I always sort of think, no, this is going to, you know, everyone expects this to be at least pretty amazing, so I better not go home yet.
And you've obviously made a hell of a lot of films in your time. Is there anything you'd really love to, like a genre or something you haven't touched on yet that you'd love to do?
Yeah, I mean, that kind of part of me sort of, I'd love to maybe make something, well, I say a sci-fi or, you know, something, and I don't mean in a sort of Star Trek, you know, sort of sense, but yeah, I kind of, there's a book that I've optioned called Beware the Devil, which is classed as horror, which is a true story about a guy that gets possessed. So although it's a bit like Dead Man's Shoes, it would be my version of a revenge thriller, but dragged down to earth, you know. Okay. So if I was making a science fiction, it would probably be in a council flat. But yeah,
amazing.
We might be able to tag sci-fi on it somewhere.
Have you got anyone lined up who you'd love to like take the lead role in that?
Daniel Day-Lewis.
Yeah.
Daniel Day-Lewis I'd love to work with, and you know, he's definitely someone that if you know, he doesn't make a lot of films, so it'd be an honour if I could get him to come over here and work with me.